The last thing Jake Mercer expected on a Thursday afternoon was to become the only thing standing between a woman and the people trying to kill her. He was locking up. The hydraulic hoist had been lowered, the oil drums capped and stacked, and the smell of cold metal hung in the air the way it always did when a Colorado winter pressed hard against the corrugated walls of his garage. Mercer & Sons Auto the Sons part a private joke between him and his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, one that had started the year she declared she would someday inherit the business and run it better. Sat at the edge of Carver Falls, a town so small it didn't appear on most maps. That suited Jake just fine. Small meant quiet. Quiet meant safe, and safe was a thing he had come to value with the particular intensity of someone who had spent years living in its opposite. He was reaching for the breaker panel when the headlights hit him. Not headlights, a wall of them. One vehicle, then another, screaming east on Route 9 at a speed that made no sense in 4 inches of fresh snow. Jake stepped back from the side door, just as a black SUV punched sideways off the highway, fishtailed across the gravel frontage, and slid to a stop against the concrete lip of Bay 3 with a shriek of rubber and ice. The sound of it was violent and sudden, the kind of noise that doesn't leave immediately after it stops, but keeps ringing at the edges of attention. The driver's door blew open before the vehicle had fully stopped. A woman stumbled out, dark blazer, shredded at the shoulder, a cut above her left eyebrow that had painted the side of her face red. She moved fast, despite the snow, scanning the road behind her, then the garage, then Jake, and Jake felt something flicker behind her eyes that wasn't panic. It was assessment. Calculation. She was frightened, yes, but she was still thinking, please. Her voice was level, which somehow made it more frightening than if she'd screamed. Inside. They're 2 minutes behind me. Jake looked past her. Down Route 9, 3 sets of headlights had appeared out of the storm and were slowing, fanning apart, triangulating, not chasing, positioning. He recognized the spacing. Methodical. Professional. He stepped aside and held the door. She was through it in 4 seconds. Jake took 2 more to study the road. The lead vehicle had stopped a quarter mile out, the other 2 peeling right and left in a wide pincer, then followed her in and through the deadbolt. Inside, the garage was dim, warm, in a mechanical sort of way. 3 bays, a workbench cluttered with calipers and socket sets, 2 lifts, a wall rack of tires, and the kind of organized chaos that only made sense to the person who'd built it. The woman had already crossed to the far wall and was watching the frosted window above the tool chest. How many? Jake asked. I counted 8 in 2 vehicles. The third is a support unit. She paused. They'll have 2 positioned at the rear access before they move on the front. Jake looked at her. How do you know that? She didn't answer. He moved to the electrical panel on the back wall, killed the interior fluorescence. The garage dropped into the amber glow of the emergency strip light above Bay 2. Better. The woman turned from the window, and in that low light he could see her more clearly, mid-30s. Sharp features, hair pulled back and coming loose, and posture that was straight-spined even now, the kind of posture that came not from good breeding but from deliberate practice. I'm Jake. He pulled the breaker for the exterior sign. Who are they? People who want something I have. She pressed 2 fingers against the cut above her eye. Winced. Emily Hartwell. I'm sorry for bringing this to you. I didn't have a choice. The SUV was running on fumes and your lights were the only ones on. You don't need to apologize. Jake was already moving, pulling a coil of aircraft cable from the lower shelf of the tool rack. I need you to stay away from the windows and keep low. I can help. You're bleeding from your head, and you've been driving in a blizzard. He looked at her steadily. In about 60 seconds, I'm going to need you to do exactly what I say, the moment I say it. Can you do that? Emily Hartwell looked at him the way people rarely looked at Jake anymore. Not at the grease-stained work shirt, not at the unremarkable garage, but at him. Whatever she saw made her nod once, without hesitation. Good, Jake said, and got to work. The first one came through the side door at Bay 1. He was good. Came in low. Swept the corners first. Moved on a diagonal away from the light source. Textbook breach. He had maybe 4 seconds before his eyes adjusted. He didn't get 4 seconds. Jake was already positioned above him on the service catwalk, a narrow steel walkway bolted to the wall 6 feet up, normally used to access the ductwork. He came down silently, drove his forearm across the man's throat from behind, controlled the fall, and had him on the ground and zip-tied with a shop cord before the man could process what was happening. Jake pulled the earpiece free, pressed it to his own ear. Static. Then, 2. Confirm entry. 2. Respond. Jake took the man's radio, clicked it twice, the universal acknowledged, and slipped it into his shirt pocket. The second operative came around the back of Bay 3 with a flashlight. Overconfident, he'd heard the double click from his partner and assumed a clean entry. He was leading with the light instead of staying behind it, which told Jake he was either nervous or undertrained. Jake let him pass the trunk of the '98 Silverado that had been parked in Bay 3 for 2 weeks, waiting on a transmission part. Then stepped out from the driver's side, caught the flashlight wrist with his left hand, redirected, and put the man face down over the hood in one motion. The steel of the hood rang softly in the cold garage. The man was out in under 10 seconds. 1, 2 report. Beginning phase 2. That meant the front. Jake moved back toward Emily's position near the workbench. She hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound, and was holding a lug wrench in her right hand with a grip that suggested she actually intended to use it. 2 down, he said quietly. 3 more coming through the front overhead door in approximately 20 seconds. There's a gap in the lower frame where the weather stripping has pulled away. They'll try to lift it manually to avoid noise. Emily stared at him. How do you know about the weather stripping? It's my garage. That's not what I meant. He met her eyes briefly. I know. He crossed to the hydraulic control for Bay 2, turned the manual valve a quarter turn. The hoist rose with a low pneumatic hiss, slow enough to be quiet, just enough to change the geometry of the space. Then he took up position on the left side of the overhead door, back flat to the wall, and waited. The door lifted 6 inches. Hands appeared at the lower edge. 2 men slid under in quick succession, a third maintaining position outside. Jake didn't rush it. The first man came up off the floor and turned right away from Jake, toward the workbench. A pressure point strike to the back of the neck, controlled and precise, and he went down without a sound. The second was faster. He heard something, turned, and got his hands up. Jake absorbed a glancing forearm block, stepped inside the man's guard, locked the elbow, applied torque. There was a brief, strangled sound, and then nothing. He didn't break the arm. He came close, but he didn't. The third man outside hesitated. He'd heard something, or maybe heard nothing where there should have been something, which was worse. Jake flattened against the wall. 30 seconds. A minute. Then footsteps retreating back toward the vehicles. Jake let out a slow breath. That's 5. He turned. Emily was still at the workbench, wrench still in her hand, watching him with an expression he hadn't seen directed at him in a long time. Something between wonder and something colder, the beginning of a question she wasn't sure she wanted answered. "Who are you?" she said. Jake bent down, began securing the second man's wrists. "Right now? The only thing keeping you alive. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters for the next few hours." He stood, moved to the window, checked the road. The third vehicle had pulled back past the turnoff. Waiting, regrouping, reporting. "There are more coming," he said. "We have maybe 40 minutes before they bring a larger team." He looked at her, the cut still seeping, the steadiness in her eyes. "I need to get my daughter. Then I need you to tell me everything." He cleaned the cut above her eye with a first aid kit he kept above the tool chest. Working by the light of a headlamp, Emily sat on an overturned bucket and held still with the practiced patience of someone accustomed to ignoring discomfort. "The bleeding's slowing," Jake said. "It'll need stitches eventually. Right now it needs closure strips." He pressed 2 butterfly bandages across the wound. She didn't flinch. "You're the CEO," he said. It wasn't a question. He'd recognized her name 30 seconds after she said it. Hartwell Technologies, Defense Contracting, AI Systems Development, $17 billion in federal contracts. Her face had been on the cover of Forbes twice in 3 years. Founder and CEO, yes. A pause. That bothers you? No. It tells me the people outside aren't random. He sat back, studied her. You positioned yourself at the northwest corner when you came in, away from the windows, sight lines to both entry points, back to a solid wall. Emily said nothing. You held the lug wrench like you've held a weapon before. Grip below the head, elbow in, weight on the back foot. Jake kept his voice neutral, and when I told you what the team outside would do, you didn't look confused. You looked like someone confirming information they already had. The silence stretched. Outside, the snow had thickened to the kind of steady, isolating weight that made the world beyond 50 yards disappear entirely. It had the quality of a judgment, all that white accumulation, patient and indifferent, building pressure without hurry. Jake had grown accustomed to Colorado winters. They didn't apologize for themselves. My company's current primary project, Emily said at last, is an autonomous threat assessment system. Military application. Classified beyond what I'm going to tell you, in a garage in Colorado. She met his eyes. There are people not adversarial foreign actors, but people within the domestic contracting apparatus who believe the project gives Hartwell too much leverage. They want the core architecture, or they want it destroyed. And tonight, I was driving back from a site visit at our Boulder facility. I had a 2-vehicle security detail. Both were disabled, one run off the road. One had a remote shutdown, introduced to its engine system 2 hours before I left. Her jaw tightened. Somebody inside my organization helped them. Jake was quiet for a moment. How long have you been running? Since Vail, roughly 90 miles. He looked at her, the exhaustion she was suppressing, the deliberate evenness of her breathing, the way she kept her weight off her right side. You're favoring your ribs. I'll live. I know. I'm noting it because in about 20 minutes, I may need you to move fast. Something shifted in her expression. Not softness exactly, but a recalibration. You're not going to ask me to explain more, or tell me this isn't your problem, or call the police. Calling the police brings 4 officers and 2 cruisers, Jake said. The people outside brought 8 operators in 3 vehicles with radio coordination. That math doesn't work in anyone's favor. He stood, and you already said your organization is compromised. That extends to whoever they'd call. Emily looked at him for a long moment. Most people would be terrified right now. Most people would be. Jake agreed, and crossed the garage to get his daughter. She was at Mrs. Pacheco's house 2 streets over a standing arrangement on nights Jake worked late. He called ahead, spoke for 30 seconds, and had Lily bundled into her coat and out the door before the older woman had finished asking questions. Lily was 8 years old, and had her mother's eyes a clear, particular gray that seemed to take in more than most people thought to offer. She was small for her age, and talked in the unhurried way of someone who had decided words were worth choosing carefully. She did not panic. Jake had never entirely understood where that came from, whether it was temperament or something she'd absorbed from the particular texture of their life together, the way they'd learned to move through difficulty without narrating it into catastrophe. She walked into the garage, saw Emily sitting on the overturned bucket with butterfly strips on her forehead and a lug wrench in her lap, and said, "You're hurt." "A little," Emily said. "We have arnica in the first aid kit. It helps with bruising." Lily hung her backpack on a hook near the door, with the unconscious precision of a child who knew where things belonged. "My dad put it in after I fell off the climbing wall at school." "That's good to know." Lily looked at her father. A look that was not a question. Jake didn't lie to his daughter about the texture of their circumstances. Had made a principle of it, but a check-in. "How serious is this?" He gave her the small nod that meant serious, but manageable. She nodded back and went to find the arnica. Emily watched this exchange with something that might have been disbelief, or might have been recognition of something she hadn't expected to find in a garage in a blizzard. "She's not afraid," she said quietly. "She trusts that I'll handle what needs handling." Jake opened the fuse box on the back wall and began doing something careful with the wiring. I've worked hard to deserve that. Lily came back with the arnica cream and applied it to Emily's bruised cheekbone, with the focused gentleness of a child who takes small tasks seriously. Emily sat very still. "What's your name?" Lily asked. "Emily. I'm Lily." She applied a second careful pass of the cream. "Are the people who hurt you going to come back?" "Lily," Jake said. "It's okay," Emily said. "Yes. Probably." Lily considered this. "My dad will handle it." She said it without bravado, not a boast. Just information. The way she'd tell someone the garage opened at 8. She capped the arnica and set it on the workbench. "Are you hungry? We have granola bars in my backpack." Emily Hartwell, founder and CEO of a $17 billion defense technology company, who had been run off roads and chased through a blizzard, and held herself together with sheer controlled will, for the last 3 hours, looked at an 8-year-old girl, offering her a granola bar, and some necessary, long-maintained tension left her face. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." They sat in the amber light of Bay 2, while the snow built up on the windows and the men outside regrouped, eating granola bars. Jake had found a thermos of coffee in the Silverado. The owner had left it and forgotten it, and Lily explained to Emily the precise taxonomy of car problems she had learned from watching her father work, and Emily listened with complete attention, and for 40 minutes the garage was the warmest place in the world. The radio crackled at 11:14 p.m. Not the one Jake had taken from the operative. His own, a compact encrypted unit that lived at the bottom of his toolbox under a false panel. So old and so deliberately hidden that it had started to feel more like a relic than a device. He hadn't turned it on in 3 years. Someone had turned it on for him. The voice was one he recognized. Not a sound. He'd forgotten the kind of voice you remember the way you remember the moment a door closes for the last time. Ghost. "This is Meridian. Stand down. The package is federal property. You will deliver her to the coordinates on Channel 7, or we will consider you hostile." Jake stood very still. Ghost. His operational name. From a period of his life that had officially never happened, documented nowhere, paid for in ways that didn't appear in any accounting. He picked up the radio, pressed transmit, said nothing. "We know you're listening, Ghost. We know who she is to you. You already know how this ends." He set the radio down. Emily was watching him from across the garage. She'd heard. Her face had gone careful and level, the expression of someone who has just received information that changes the map. "Meridian," she said. Jake looked at her. "Colonel Harlan Wexford," she said. "Calls himself Meridian on operations. He's the domestic contracting liaison for the DoD office that oversees my company's primary contract." A pause. "He's been trying to acquire my core architecture for 18 months through legitimate channels. 3 months ago, I rejected his final offer." She looked at Jake. "Who are you to him?" Jake crossed to the workbench. He opened a panel beneath the lower shelf, a space hidden behind a false backing. The kind of modification that required both carpentry skills and a very specific reason to bother. He lifted out a case, old, military-spec polymer, matte black, combination lock. The surface had a faint scar across one corner where it had been dragged across gravel on a night he didn't think about often. He thought about it now. 5 years ago, he said, "I was part of a 12-person unit that ran operations in environments I can't name for reasons I can't specify." He worked the combination without looking at it. "Our last mission went wrong. Not tactically, strategically. We were sent in based on intelligence that was either bad or deliberately corrupted. 4 people died who shouldn't have. The mission's objective was achieved, but the asset we were sent to extract," he stopped. Opened the case. Inside. A tactical radio, 2 spare magazines, a folded piece of paper with numbers on it, and a photograph. He picked up the photograph. Was a woman. A contractor with classified clearances, running a project I didn't have the clearance to know the nature of. She was injured in the extraction. By the time we reached the rendezvous, she was conscious but severely concussed. No memory of the preceding 72 hours. He looked at the photograph, then he held it up so Emily could see it. The woman in the photograph was younger. Shorter hair. A bruise across the left side of her face. Standing in a medical facility. being supported by a man whose face was not visible. Emily's face. She stood very still. I didn't put it together immediately, Jake said. Your name was different in the file. A cover designation. But the way you moved when you came through the door. The corner you chose. The grip on the wrench. He set the photograph on the workbench. I've spent 3 years telling myself I'd done the right thing. That you were safe somewhere. That Wexford and the people he worked for hadn't gotten to you. The silence between them was full and complete. I don't remember it, Emily said at last. Her voice was steady, but her hands, Jake noticed, were not. There is a gap, 11 days. The doctors said it was trauma-induced. I woke up in a hospital in Denver, and they told me there'd been a security incident at a facility I'd visited. I was told the specifics were classified. She looked at the photograph for a long time. You're the reason I'm alive. I'm the reason Wexford has been hunting you for 5 years, Jake said. He expected the extraction to fail. He needed you not to make it out. He closed the case. I didn't know that then. I know it now. The radio crackled again. Last warning, ghost. Deliver the package. 10 minutes. Jake looked at his daughter, who had been listening with the still, serious attention she brought to things that mattered. He looked at Emily. Lily, he said. I need you to go to the back room and lock the door. The combination is my birthday. Lily stood up. She kissed him once on the cheek, the way she always did when she understood the nature of a moment without needing it explained to her. Then she went to the back room, and they heard the lock turn. What's the plan? Emily asked. Wexford doesn't know what I know, Jake said. He thinks I'm an isolated asset with no active network. He's wrong. He picked up the tactical radio from the case and pressed a sequence of buttons that activated an encrypted channel. I kept one contact, off-book, off-grid. Former intelligence, now private. He held Emily's eyes. But we're not going to wait for them. We're going to give Wexford exactly what he thinks he wants. The message came through on the encrypted radio at 11:31 p.m. It was not from Wexford. It was from a secondary channel, a frequency Jake had never officially been given but had memorized from a briefing he'd never officially attended. The message was 6 words. Target acquired. Terminate before extraction. Authorized. Jake read it twice. Not because he didn't understand it the first time, because it confirmed the thing he'd been almost willing to hope wasn't true. Wexford didn't want Emily extracted. He never had. The deliver the package language on the primary channel was theater. For whatever record was being kept, the secondary channel was the real order, the one that existed outside any accountability structure, in the way that certain orders had always existed outside accountability structures in his former life. Terminate before extraction. Jake set the radio down on the workbench. He looked at his hands for a moment. Grease still under the nails. There was something almost absurd about it, the life he'd built, the particular ordinaries of it, the oil changes and transmission jobs and granola bars and 8-year-old daughter, all of it pressed up against this. Emily was watching him. What does it say? He turned it so she could read it. Her expression didn't change much. That was the thing about her that kept striking him, the absence of performed composure. The way it was simply actual. She read the message the way she'd have read a difficult financial projection, processing it, calibrating around it. He's going to make it look like I died in the acquisition, she said. An operator killed in the crossfire during an authorized federal retrieval. She set the radio down. And you? Operator who resisted. Same story. Lily? The word sat between them with its full weight. No, Jake said. That's not who Wexford is. He's careful. Clean. A child would create complications he doesn't want. He paused. But I'm not going to leave her here, and I'm not going to leave you. Emily stood up from the bucket. She moved to the window, looked at the road, the vehicles still there, the distant figures, the snow. She stood with her back to him, and her shoulders had a particular set to them. The architecture of someone about to make a decision they've already made. I'm going to walk out, she said. No, you're not. If they have what they came for, they leave. You and Lily are safe. I can work with being in Wexford's custody. I know things he doesn't know. I know. I can. Emily, she turned. I spent 3 years believing I'd done the right thing by getting you out and disappearing. He held her gaze. I'm not going to spend another 3 years on that. Silence. Outside, an engine turned over. Then another. The team was moving. They were done waiting. We have about 4 minutes, Jake said. Tell me about the backup architecture, the thing you wouldn't give Wexford. Emily studied him. Then, there's a secondary server array at our Fort Collins facility. Independent network, air-gapped. The core AI architecture lives there, not on any primary Hartwell server, not accessible through any standard credential pathway. She paused. If Wexford gets the main system, he gets a shell. The real project is intact. But I'm the only one with the biometric credentials to access it. Jake nodded slowly. That's why he needs you alive long enough to be useful and then not at all. Yes. Then keeping you alive is the most important thing I can do. He turned back to the workbench, began making preparations. Help me, or stay out of my way. Emily Hartwell picked up the lug wrench. I'll help. They came in hard and fast, no more finesse, no more triangulation. Wexford had decided to spend assets, which meant the timeline had compressed for reasons they couldn't see from inside the garage. 6 operatives through the front. 2 through the roof access a detail Jake had prepared for, having blocked the hatch from the catwalk side with a 200-pound transmission casing wedged against the frame. That bought time. Not much. Jake had spent the preceding 4 minutes doing things to the garage that would have alarmed his insurance company. The overhead door came up fast, blown by a compact charge that took the lock and the lower quarter of the right panel. Jake was already off the floor catwalk again, different section, above Bay 3. He came down on the first operative with both feet, used the momentum to transition, hit the second man with an elbow across the jaw as he was spinning to respond. He moved like someone who had never fully stopped moving this way, like a language he'd gone years without speaking that came back without effort. The third man got a clean shot off. Wide, because he was aiming at a target that had already moved, but it clipped the edge of the tire rack and sent a cascade of rubber tumbling into the bay. Jake used the noise as cover, swept the man's legs from the left, controlled the fall from the direction of Bay 1 sound, then the distinct aluminum ring of a lug wrench connecting with something. Jake came around the Silverado to find Emily standing over an operative who was going to have a significant headache when he woke up. She was breathing hard, right hand wrapped on the wrench, and there was a fresh streak of red on her forearm, a graze, not a wound, but it was going to hurt. You moved too far forward, Jake said. I know, I corrected. She looked at the man on the ground, then at Jake. There's one more in the back. I heard him come through the side door. Jake turned. Yes, the side door, which he'd left unlocked as a funnel point. The last operative was against the wall near the workbench, and he had his weapon up, and he was aiming at Emily. Jake put himself in between. The shot was deafening in the metal space. It caught Jake in the left side. High, below the shoulder, not center mass, not fatal. But the force of it put him on one knee. He heard Emily shout something. He heard the operative take 1 step, then 2, then the sound of the wrench again, much harder this time. Silence. Jake was on the floor of Bay 2, which was cold and smelled of motor oil and snow tracked in from outside. He pressed his hand against his side. Wet. Serious but manageable, if they moved quickly. Emily was beside him, and her face was very close, and she said his name twice in a tone of voice that was not like anything else he'd heard from her. I'm all right, he said. You're not all right. I'm ambulatory. He got to one knee. Pushed himself up. I'm all right enough. She put his arm over her shoulder without being asked and took part of his weight, and they moved toward the back room. Lily opened the door at the sound of his voice. She saw the blood, and her face did something complicated, and then became very still. She crossed to him without a word, took his free arm, helped Emily lower him onto the camp cot Jake kept in the back room for overnight jobs. The kit, Jake said. Lily had it open, and was already looking at the wound with the careful attention of a child who has been taught to see clearly under pressure. It went through, she said. The exit is in the back. She looked at Emily. Can you hold pressure here while I get the gauze? Emily took Lily's place without hesitation. Their hands crossed briefly on the compress, and something passed between them in that moment, the particular wordless language of people doing necessary things together under duress. She's going to give herself up, Jake said. Lily looked at him. No, Emily said. That's not. You were thinking it again, I can tell. He looked at her steadily. Don't. The radio on the workbench crackled through the open door. Wexford's voice, this time without the tactical framing. Personal. Deliberate. I know you're still in there, Ghost. I know you're hurt. I'm giving you one final exit. Send out Hartwell, and I'll pull my people back. You have my word as. Jake reached over and turned it off. His word, Emily said quietly. Right. Lily finished packing the wound with a focus that would have been remarkable in a person twice her age. Okay, she said. That'll hold for a few hours if he doesn't do anything stupid. Defining stupid as? Jake asked. Running. Fighting. Lifting anything. She looked at him directly. Dad, I know. He held her gaze for a moment. The specific weight of it, everything they'd built in this town, in this garage. In the quiet, daily ordinaries of their life, pressed down on him. And through him, and out the other side, into something resolute. He thought about Claire, who had been gone 4 years, and whose absence had a particular texture that never entirely smoothed. He thought about the things he'd done before the garage, before Carver Falls, before Lily knew how to read. He thought about the kinds of decisions that define a man's life not as a string of connected events, but as the sum of the moments when he was required to choose, and he chose. He reached for the tactical radio in the case, pressed the activation sequence, spoke 4 words. Meridian. This is Ghost. A pause. Then Wexford's voice on the encrypted channel surprised, controlled. Ghost. I didn't expect. You have 6 men down. The 2 on the roof couldn't get through. Your secondary team is regrouping at the highway junction. A beat. I know about the terminate order. Silence. I have a copy of the secondary channel transmission, time-stamped and authenticated. He was calm. I have Emily Hartwell, who is alive and functional and the sole holder of biometric credentials to the Fort Collins array. I have documentation connecting 3 domestic black operations to your authorization codes that I've been sitting on for 5 years. Another beat, and I have a contact in federal oversight who is currently reading their email. The silence this time was longer. What do you want? Wexford said. You're going to pull your people back to the highway and wait. In the morning, when the road's clear, you're going to have 2 federal oversight agents meet us at the Fort Collins facility, agents of our choosing. Emily is going to make a full statement under federal protection. And then you are going to discover that your authority over her contract has been subject to a conflict of interest review. Emily was looking at him. In exchange, Jake continued, for which I will decline to release the operational documentation I mentioned. Tonight's incident will be filed as an incursion by unknown actors, origin undetermined. He paused. This is the only offer you're going to get. He released transmit, set the radio down. The silence from outside went on for 2 minutes, which was how long it took Wexford to realize that Jake had built the cage, while Wexford was still deciding whether to step in. Understood, Wexford said finally. Pullback order issued. Through the small high window above the camp cot, Jake watched the headlights withdraw. 1 vehicle. 2. The 3rd. Lily let out a breath that was very, very small. Emily sat down on the edge of the cot. She was not crying. She was past crying. Through the territory of it, and out the other side into something quieter. She looked at Jake for a long time. You planned that, she said. Most of it. The contact in federal oversight has been reading their email, Jake said. I sent it 3 hours ago, when you first walked through the door, and I recognized your face. He paused. I've had the documentation for 5 years. I've been waiting for a reason to use it that was clear enough. Emily looked at him. Is it? She asked. Yes, Jake said. It's very clear. The snow stopped at 4 a.m. Emily was awake. She'd been awake for most of the hours since the operatives had pulled back, sitting on the camp cot in the back room while Lily slept across from her on the folded welding blanket. and Jake rested with the carefully controlled stillness of someone managing pain. She'd dressed and cleaned the graze on her forearm. She'd drunk the rest of the coffee from the thermos. She'd sat in the particular quiet of a building that is no longer in immediate danger, but has not yet fully remembered how to be ordinary. She was thinking about the photograph, not seeing it for the first time in the way that photographs show you things you weren't looking for. She'd been seeing it for years. In the shape of certain silences in her own history, in the 11-day gap that her doctors had named and her mind had never quite accepted the naming of. She had read every file available to her, reviewed every medical report, spoken to 3 different trauma specialists over the course of 18 months, and none of it had produced the thing she actually wanted, which was not information but recognition. The feeling of a real event clicking into alignment with the space where the memory of it should live. At 4:17 a.m., something shifted. It was not a flood. It was not a door swinging open. It was more like a room coming slowly into focus shapes, resolving out of gray, acquiring edges, becoming objects with names. A corridor, a noise like cargo being moved, the smell of cold air and something chemical. And then, a face, not Jake's face, as it was now, but younger, exhausted, streaked with something dark, and looking at her with the particular expression of someone who has decided to do the right thing, even though the right thing has a cost. She sat very still. She remembered his voice. Not the words, she still couldn't retrieve the words, but the quality of it. Even. Quiet. The way he spoke now. She remembered thinking, he's going to get in trouble for this. When the roads cleared at first light, they drove in Jake's truck, Lily in the middle, Emily at the window. Jake's hand steady on the wheel, despite the bandaging under his shirt. The federal oversight contact a woman named Darlene Voss, who had been Darlene Marsh, when she and Jake had overlapped in a training program that didn't officially exist. Met them at the Fort Collins facility at 8 a.m., with 2 colleagues who had the specific energy of people who had been waiting a long time to be useful. Wexford did not come himself. He sent a lawyer. The lawyer spent 4 hours in a conference room reviewing documentation that Jake had kept for 5 years in a polymer case behind a false panel in a garage in a town that didn't appear on most maps. By noon, the conflict of interest review was official. By 3 p.m., Hartwell Technologies' primary contract had been administratively frozen pending a full oversight audit not of Emily's company, but of the contracting office that had administered it. By 5 p.m., Emily Hartwell stood in the parking lot of the Fort Collins facility in the pale winter sun and breathed. Jake was beside her. He was favoring his left side in the way he would probably favor it for several weeks. "You knew about the oversight mechanism," she said. "I knew it existed. I wasn't certain it still functioned the way it was supposed to." It did. It did. She looked at him. The photograph had been in her coat pocket since she'd asked him, quietly, in the garage, if she could have it. She touched it now through the fabric. "You stayed in Carver Falls because it was off the map." "Yes, in case they ever came. In case I ever needed to know they were coming before they arrived." A pause. Small town. Anyone new stands out. I'd know in hours. Emily was quiet for a moment. The sun was doing something specific to the Colorado sky, wide and pale blue, and very clear in the way it only got in the cold, as if winter had rinsed everything. "I owe you more than I can calculate," she said. "You don't owe me anything. You survived." That was always the point. She turned to look at him fully. "I remember your voice," she said. "From the extraction. Not everything, but your voice." Jake was quiet. "I remember thinking you were going to get in trouble for helping me." "I did," he said. "It was worth it." Lily appeared from the entrance of the facility, wearing her coat and her backpack, carrying a hot chocolate that one of the oversight agents had apparently acquired from somewhere. She gave Emily a evaluating look. "You both look tired," Lily said. "Can we go home now?" Spring came to Carver Falls the way it always did, incrementally, almost suspiciously, as if winter wasn't entirely sure it was finished, but had run out of energy to argue. The snow retreated from the roadsides first, then from the fields, then from the shaded northern slopes behind town. The creek that ran behind the garage on Pike Street was running fast and loud, with meltwater for 3 weeks in April, and Lily spent 2 of those weekends fishing it for trout. She never caught but found the attempt entirely satisfying. Jake's garage expanded. Not aggressively, a single bay added to the east side. A separate office built onto the back where the camp cot used to live. A small sign beside the original one that said Mercer Security Consulting in clean, unshouted letters. The automotive work didn't stop, it was the foundation of the business, the thing that paid reliably and kept him connected to the ordinary mechanisms of the town. But there was now, quietly, a second business inside the first. 3 former colleagues found their way to Carver Falls over the spring. They didn't announce themselves or make any particular event of arriving. They showed up, looked at the garage, had coffee in the new office, and stayed. Good people. People who, like Jake, had eventually found the life they'd been working in too costly in specific ways and had been looking for somewhere to redirect. They were quiet about their histories and diligent about the work, which was all Jake had ever asked of anyone. Within 6 weeks, the consulting side of the business had 3 active contracts and a waiting list, which nobody mentioned out loud because mentioning it felt like tempting something. Emily Hartwell moved to Carver Falls in late April. This was not a quiet event. A woman of her profile relocating to a town of 3,000 people generated a specific quality of local attention, the kind that expressed itself as exaggerated casualness and people inventing reasons to stop by the garage. She bought a house on Caldwell Road, a white clapboard thing with a front porch and a garden that had been allowed to go sensibly wild by the previous owner. She kept her role at Hartwell Technologies, but moved the company's primary R&D operations to Boulder, 40 miles away, which was close enough for daily function and far enough to separate the work from the life. She did not stop to explain this decision to anyone. She had thought about it carefully, and it made sense to her, and she did it. Lily received the news with the equanimity she brought to most things. Her commentary, delivered over dinner the evening Emily came to tell them, was, "The house on Caldwell Road has a good apple tree in the back. The Hendersons had it before they moved to Phoenix. The apples are good in September." "I'll keep that in mind," Emily said. "You should plant more in the front. The garden is mostly rosemary right now." "I like rosemary." Lily considered this. "That's fine, then." Jake said nothing. He watched his daughter conduct this small, careful assessment of the new arrangement, and felt something in him that he hadn't felt in a long time, the specific warmth of a future that seemed genuinely possible. The first Carver Falls Christmas after the garage expanded was a quiet one. December came in with the conviction of Colorado Decembers, the temperature dropping hard in the last week of November, and the snow arriving in the first week of December and staying. As if it had made a commitment, the garage on Pike Street closed at noon on Christmas Eve. Jake had strung lights along the service bay's ceiling, a practical strand of warm white, nothing elaborate, and Lily had added tinsel to the tire rack, which Jake had objected to on the grounds that tinsel shed metallic fibers, and he found them in engine bays for months after the holidays, and then declined to remove because Lily had been so certain about it, and her certainty, when it touched on aesthetics, had an authority he found hard to argue with. Emily arrived at 6 with a bottle of wine and a lemon cake, which had become her contribution to the ritual of holidays at the Mercer house. A ritual that was new enough to still be establishing its own customs, accumulating the small, repeated gestures that eventually become tradition without anyone deciding that's what they're building. The wine was good. The cake was excellent. Lily ate 2 pieces and argued for a third, with a rigor that suggested she'd been thinking about it strategically. They ate at the kitchen table. Lily explained the taxonomy of the holiday specials she'd been watching on television with the critical rigor she brought to all subjects. The kitchen was warm. Outside, the snow was the particular soft kind that comes in windless, cold, steady, and thorough, building up on the windowsills in clean white lines. After dinner, Lily brought 3 ornaments from her backpack ones she'd made at school, each with a name in glitter glue that had dried slightly uneven, in the endearing way of glitter glue projects. She hung them on the small tree in the corner of the living room, with the focus of someone doing ceremonial work. Jake stood in the doorway. On the tree, beside the lopsided paper star they'd made the year after Claire died, beside the glass ball that had been his mother's, and the ceramic snowflake that had been Lily's first ever ornament, hung a pair of old dog tags on a thin chain. Military issue. The metal had the particular worn quality of things that have been kept, for reasons that had nothing to do with sentiment and everything to do with truth. Emily stood beside him. She asked me if she could put them there, he said. 3 weeks ago, I said yes. Emily was quiet for a moment. They're yours? They were. He watched Lily step back to assess the tree with curatorial satisfaction. They're ours now, I think. The snow outside was steady and gentle and utterly indifferent to any of the specific and extraordinary things happening inside the small house on Pike Street. Lily went to the window and watched it fall for a while, and then turned and said, "It looks like the night you came to us." She was looking at Emily. "Yes," Emily said. "I suppose it does. That was a good night." Lily turned back to the window. Her tone was matter-of-fact. The way she said most important things. Even with the shooting, Jake put his hand over his mouth. Emily looked at him, and he looked at Emily, and neither of them could speak for a moment. Even with the shooting, Emily agreed. The fire in the hearth had burned down to coals that gave off a steady, reliable warmth. The dog tags turned slowly on their chain, catching the light of the small tree and the low lamp on the side table. Outside, the snow went on performing its patient and anonymous work on the world, covering what was hard and making the whole landscape quiet and possible. The way snow does, indifferent to history, ignorant of what had been broken and what had been built, concerned only with the present moment, and the gentle, insistent business of making everything white and clean and new. There are people you meet in a storm. You don't choose them. The storm chooses them for you, or something older and more accurate than choice does. You just have to be paying enough attention to recognize what you've been given. Jake Mercer had spent 5 years being careful, staying small, staying hidden, learning to deserve the quiet life rather than just occupying it. He had built a garage and a routine and a relationship with his daughter that was honest in ways most people never manage to be with their children, because he'd decided early that she deserved honesty more than she deserved protection from difficult things. The blizzard on Route 9 didn't ask his permission. It gave him his family back, the one he hadn't known he was still waiting for.